So I
I'm
think there's
always curious though, because the like the Comicsgate audience makes the argument that it's plummeting sales, that's what's destroying comic books, is that
Well,
woke stuff. But I always wonder, because I wonder if the causality is backwards. I wonder if the comic book sales are going under because video games and YouTube have taken over those sales, and it's like a last gasp effort to get viewers by catering to the
you're
wokesters.
completely right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. Comic book
Yeah.
sales have been plummeting for a long time.
Mhm.
And there's many, many, many reasons for why this is. It's what
Well,
you said,
video
video
games,
games,
movies.
YouTube, movies.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, a big part of it is that it's incredibly difficult for a reader to get into American comics, because it's not like part of the success of manga, I think, because, and that's a good comparison, because while comics are dying, Japanese manga is exploding.
Yeah. Yes. Because
It has so much a broader, more selection of types of stories that you can read. The writing, in my opinion, is 1,000 times better. The storytelling is 1,000 times better for the most part.
because they're not woke, right? They
Well, it has
believe in
nothing
like
beyond,
traditional
it has nothing
gender
to do
roles
with the
and stuff like
wokeness
that.
whatsoever.
Really?
Nothing to do with the wokeness. Even pre-woke, manga was way better than American comics. It's just the writing styles, because manga doesn't. There is comics and manga that is written for children, but it's not dumbed down to be stupid.
Right.
And a lot of American comics, they are dumbed down to be stupid. They're just not written well. I don't know what it is. The writing styles are so different between American
It's those
comics
college
and manga.
kids. They're writing them. The woke college kids just got out of college and they're writing all these.
I'm saying even pre-woke stuff. Just throw woke stuff out the window. Manga was crushing comics. But another big issue too, besides I just think the writing is so much better in manga, and also the art is so much better, is that if someone starts telling you about a manga and you go, oh, that sounds interesting, like I can go and get the first volume of that comic and start reading it and just read it in order. But if you're like, oh, I want to read Spider-Man, where do you start? Do you start like in 1960? Do you start in 1990? There's like, no, it's like impossible to start reading American comics because they're all based on this shared universe and this backstory that goes on for decades, and no one knows how to get involved in this stuff.
That's a great point. The entry level is unclear.
Yeah, it's impossible. Someone brought up a good story. I forget who it was. They said that a grandma walks into a comic book shop and she's like, "Oh, my grandson really liked that new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. Like, I want to buy him the comics for that." It's like, well, there are no comics for that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, well, where do you start? Do you start when Miles Morales first became Spider-Man? But then that's based off of years and years before that, where the ultimate Peter Parker was Spider-Man before he gets killed off. So it's like it's impossible to get people into this thing. It's a terrible structure.
Yeah.
Duperda for $20. Thank you very much, Duperda. Says it also doesn't help that most comic storylines are rebooted every few years. Oh, that's very true. That's very true. Since we're talking about wokeness, Wonder Woman's a good example. She hasn't gone more than 4 years without a complete redesign. Yeah, that's true. And that's part of them trying to combat the confusing storylines, is that they just keep rebooting the same characters again and again and again. And it doesn't work. I like I like all the American comic heroes. I've read American comics in the past. I don't know. I just lose interest with them in a way that I don't lose interest with a lot of manga.
Yeah. Manga sets up really crazy scenarios, which is cool.
Yes. Well, and also, and I don't know if it was always this way, but manga is kind of structured like Netflix TV shows, where good manga always has like the continual hook at the end that's going to keep drawing you forward.
Hey, we did that in our book.
We did. And but a lot of American comics are still set up like they'll have little arcs, but they feel like a lot more episodic. And it doesn't have that same drive pushing you through the story the way a lot of good manga, like Tower of God's a perfect example. If you ever want to learn how to write a comic like a Netflix show, just read Tower of God. I've never seen anything like it. They put these hooks in, they put these mental hooks in every issue that just drives your brain to want to like read like 1,000 chapters of Tower of God. But
is there an audiobook?
No, sorry, Adam.
Oh, well, I'll look at the pictures.
Yeah. X Hammer X13 Thor for 1776. Thank you, X Hammer. Says Sitch is 100% correct on U.S. comics versus manga. It's very rare that you have a confusing timeline in manga. S class is best class.
Oh, God, I love.
I summoning jutsu to summon Sargon. Haha, cheers. There you go. Summoning new jutsu. Yes. Thanato777 for $10 says, my cool cats. The biggest problem with comics is that they're all about the characters because the characters are the moneymakers, while manga seems to be more about the stories. A-team for the win.
There we go. Exactly. Best case scenario, you get both, though. Best case scenario, you got good characters and
I
good
actually
story.
kind of disagree with that. Because I think all the best stories are ones where you see characters that are interesting interact with each other. To me, maybe that's just me, but that's where more enjoyable stuff comes from the story, not necessarily the story itself. I don't know. I have to think about that. Crapspackle. Crapspackle. There you go.
I like that.
For $5 says woke comics don't sell, but back sell like hotcakes, fella. Is that true? Like old comics are selling like really high right now? Because that would, if that's true, that would lead to the credence that it is woke stuff that's destroying the comic book industry.
I think Comicsgate makes a pretty strong argument that it's woke stuff. They're always posting stuff on Twitter that I'm like, is this for what? Well, this is real? Oh my God.
I guess here's something I didn't consider, which could be very possible, which is that it's true comics have been on this downturn for the last 20 years. But that was before all these comic book movies started to come out. And you would expect that when all these comic book movies come out, that comic book sales would increase to some amount because of this. Because people watch the movies and they say, I want more of that.
Hell yeah.
And if that isn't happening, then there probably is a good argument that that's because current comics are woke and terrible and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So, no, that does make sense.
That's the theory. I buy into it. I think it's true.
Yeah.
I think that I think as someone who's been around a lot of writers, I think like the higher woke level, the less like understanding of human nature people are. And to write good stories, you really have to understand human nature. You have to understand human dilemma.
Yes.
Stuff like that. And it has to be a dilemma that everyone can relate to. And I just don't.
Well, there was a time period where I was reading a lot of comics. And when I was reading it, I noticed the same thing would happen in all the titles. And it really bothered me.
Storylines were repetitive.
No, not even that. It's that all the story arcs would have these massive buildups for like books and books of buildup. And then it would all be resolved in like 2 pages.
Oh, that sucks.
It's terrible.
God.
It feels
Terrible
like
pacing.
the worst fucking thing ever.
Terrible pacing. Oh,
Yes,
pacing
pacing
can
was
destroy something.
Disastrous. And I remember there was one comic book arc, a Spider-Man one, that actually didn't do that, where it had all this build up and then the conclusion was the entire last book. And I'm like, perfect. That's all I wanted. Just perfect pacing. Wonderful.
Yeah, we got pacing is huge. We're going through our books and doing it basically all together so we get the pacing right.